Okay, hold on. Okay, thank you everyone who's joining and attending. I want to thank you for joining us for today's session on a really important and serious issue, which is the labor shortage, particularly around skilled labor. It is not easy to find good engineers and so forth these days, and the impact it's going to have is having on the chemical industry. Uh, Robert Cuscino is going to be the moderator, and I'll introduce him. But I just want to make two comments. One, as head of programs for Societe de Chimie Industrielle and on the board, I encourage any of you who are not members to please be a member. There's certain privileges. You get the list of who attended each event, which is great for networking and so forth, and you get discounts off of our in-person luncheon meetings. And it's just a rip-roaring $60 a year, so it won't break the bank. So I encourage you to be members. The last thing I want to say is our next event is on November 20th from 1 to 2 o'clock, and it's going to be a very interesting panel. And it's going to be on what's the impact that all these disruptions of all types, right? They're geopolitical disruptions, economic, industry structural capacity disruptions. What impact are they having, and what should you do to try to be resilient and how to adjust to these changes? So that's going to be November 20th. It's going to go from 1 to 2 o'clock, and it'll be virtual. And at a minimum, we have Robert Westerveld, who is the editor-in-chief of Chemical Week, as one of the panelists, and I'll be one of the panelists, and we may add a third person from industry. So I hope that many of you will find that topic interesting, and if so, we hope to see you there on November 20th. With that, what I'd like to do is turn it over to Robert. Robert is a member of the program committee. He's a senior vice president at Evonik, that well-known, really small German company, right? And he basically was the one who put this panel together, and I want to thank him for that. So, Robert, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate the kind words. Excited for this panel that we're about to have. As Peter mentioned, this topic touches all of our companies, and many companies will say that their people are their greatest asset. So how do we tackle this important topic? We live in dynamic times. We see geopolitics that have resulted in nearshoring and reshoring of many different market segments and assets here in North America. We also see governments subsidizing and investing heavily in that nearshoring, reshoring activity and bringing manufacturing that historically may have been outside of the U.S. back to the United States. We also just lived through a once-in-a-lifetime, hopefully only once-in-a-lifetime pandemic with COVID, and people have also rethought in their personal lives, how long do I want to work? How do I want to work? What's really important to me going forward? And when you think about those three elements and how they go together, it puts a strain on all of our companies to really attract, retain, recruit talent for all of that growth that comes with some of that heavy investment activity that is happening before our eyes. So we're going to try to tackle that as best we can today. We are really fortunate to have three senior executives in the chemical and life sciences sector. We have Keith Holtermann, Vice President of Engineering at Liquide. We have Susan Miller, Head of Human Resources at Regenity, and Jeff Varga, Senior Vice President of Smart Materials and Specialty Additives at Evonik. So before we jump in with questions, I would like each panelist to introduce themselves, their company, and look forward to a fruitful discussion. So Susan, why don't you kick us off?
Sure, happy to be here. I'm Susan McGoff Miller. I'm currently the Head of Human Resources at Regenity Biosciences, which is a leader in a field of regenerative products. Since the 1990s, we have locations in the US and the Netherlands, about 250 employees, so quite a different size compared to my peer panelists. Regenity is at the forefront of transforming bioresorbable materials into advanced solutions to heal soft and hard tissue across medical specialties like dental, spine, orthopedics, wound care, and a lot more. I've had the privilege of working in a lot of different HR roles for the last 20 years across diverse industries, including life sciences, specialty chemicals, and food production. So I'm excited to be here today to discuss the challenges, the opportunities, and also how we at Regenity are addressing some of these issues in the short term. And thanks to the Societe for inviting us and hosting this dialogue.
Thank you, Susan. Keith?
Sure. Hi, Rob. My name's Keith Holtermann. As Rob said, I'm a Vice President of Engineering for Air Liquide, but I'll have to add on Advanced Materials. So we're a wholly owned subsidiary of Air Liquide. They're based in Paris. We're based in Branchburg, New Jersey. And we serve the semiconductor industry with advanced materials globally. So we have 10 plants ranging from Los Angeles all the way around the world to Japan. And I have a group of engineers of 75 or 100, depending on how much we're expanding. And I've been there for almost 4 years now. Prior to that, I spent 30 plus years at a big competitor, Air Products, also making specialty chemicals. And then in between, I worked in green energy for 4 years. So I'm looking forward to the panel and hoping to learn something more from my fellow panelists.
Thank you, Keith. And Jeff?
Yeah, so I'm Jeff Varga. I'm currently the head of 2 divisions for the Americas for Evonik, North America and South America. Evonik is a $16 billion roughly company with about 30,000 employees. We're involved in everything from life sciences to industrial markets. My background is material science and engineering, but I transitioned to the commercial side some years ago. I've done 8 years in Germany. I've been with the company for about 30 years. Nice to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you to the panelists. And before we jump into our first question, I really want to encourage the folks on the call to please put those questions in the chat. As you just heard, we have 3 extremely talented individuals with us to cover this very difficult and important topic. So please don't be shy and take advantage of their experience and their perspectives. So Keith, you're the one panelist amongst us that's made their whole career in engineering, while others may have transitioned to the so-called dark side. American Institute of Chemical Engineers has data indicating that the number of students enrolling in chemical engineering fields and thereby graduating chemical engineering is declining. We're also seeing an increased demand for engineers, whether it's because of that increased investment that we spoke about earlier, or some of the alternative career paths that chemical engineers and other engineers have when they graduate, specifically the whole AI space and IT space that's developing before our eyes. What are companies like Air Liquide doing that heavily rely on engineering talent to navigate this new norm of decreased supply but increased demand for engineers?
So thanks for the question. There's sort of the blocking and tackling that many people do around long-term competitiveness, and that's rotational programs when people join the company so they can see that they will learn many things and get a good background in many areas. Development programs, people usually call those. Bringing people in early as co-ops and interns so that they learn about your company at a young age and begin to think this is what work looks like. That's always helpful as well. If you're with a large enough company, which I've been lucky to be most of my career, market the parts of your company that are "quote unquote" sexy to people. So I work in an industrial gas company and have almost all of my career, but the one I'm in now has semiconductors, which is very interesting to everybody. It sounds like a tech space, and we serve the tech space, but it's really small quantity, high dollar specialty chemicals, but it feels the same, and you get to be in that market. Obviously, Air Liquide also makes hydrogen, so big green energy pull there, and that helped a lot with Air Products as well. Once they join the company and they begin to see what industry is really like a little bit more, then it's easier to get them to transition into the more traditional industries. But you've got to get them first. So lead with your best foot forward is my advice.
Thank you, Keith. Now, Susan, you're at the opposite type of company of Air Liquide. You mentioned you're at that smaller 250 person company. How does it compare and contrast with that larger company feel dealing with this type of an issue of increased demand, decreased supply?
Well, I think based on our locations, we've been pretty fortunate to be able to get the engineers that we need, especially at that entry level. It helps that we have such a compelling story, that we make such a difference in patients' lives and what we're making and being a part of that. And I think the location, we have many universities around us, and same in the Netherlands, so that helps. But I think the difference is that we don't, as a smaller company, we don't have the resources like some of the larger ones do. So we don't have formal programs that are designed just to attract people. We just have work. We have really good work. They come in and they start working right away, and they learn so much so fast. And we try things, and then you figure out how to reduce the risk, but they get to go in and accomplish things right away. So we find that we do the internship programs, and we often those translate into offers because they see how much they can accomplish, how quickly in their career very early. And that's one of the unique selling propositions that we talk about to the candidates as we try to recruit them and attract them to the company.
So Susan, maybe a follow-up question to that. So, when we talk about earlier career or even potential engineers, future engineers that are still in college, we're starting to see that next generation of workers, they're looking for different attributes in companies today when they're deciding where they want to work. Topics like sustainability and corporate culture are much more important in today's labor market. How do you see Regenity modifying your recruiting efforts to attract that talent to get it in, to then supplement all those wonderful ideas you just shared? So more on the front end piece.
Yeah, on the front end, it really is telling our stories. So we do some of the things that other companies do, but we believe we have a compelling story. It's a very exciting place to be. So we emphasize our mission. We've got, we strive to make a material difference in the lives of all of these millions of patients around the globe. And so the employees can come and be a part of that. And we tell stories like a product around GammaTile, which is used for patients diagnosed with glioblastoma. If anybody knows anybody who's been diagnosed with that, it's a pretty rough diagnosis. And the product that we make is a wafer where the radiation seed is put inside the wafer and then implanted in the place of the tumor, which reduces recovery time. There's not additional radiation. There's no side effects of radiation, and it has the same effect of traditional radiation. In addition, we have other products coming that we're co-developing that are for full thickness burns. And so imagine a person goes through a burn situation where they have full thickness burns and how painful that is. And we're co-developing, it's not on the market yet, we're co-developing a product where instead of taking tissue graft from other parts of their bodies, they're going to use our products to help heal the area that's been affected. So this is what we talk about, and people get to do this in real time. And that's what we use a lot to attract people. It's also a retention tool as we talk to our current employees and we survey them. Like, this is why people want to be here. But, besides the great people who are working here, the products, the technology, and the ability to have such a big impact. I mean, we do other things like driving our culture. Our values are not just a poster on the wall. I mean, we have determination, integrity, creativity, collaboration, and urgency. But we live these. It's a resilience and grit to find new ways to get things done together the right way and with urgency, because the patients are waiting for our products to come into the market to help them. So that's very compelling. And of course, we have a competitive compensation package. So that's kind of a hygiene factor. But we do try to incorporate flexibility, which is a big topic. And I think more than these specific topics is that we revisit what people are looking for. It's no longer like a set it and forget it approach. It's like each year we're looking at what do people want? How do we adapt our proposition to be able to speak to the candidates that we want to attract to the organization?
Okay, perfect. And Jeff, Evonik, similar to Air Liquide, you're on that larger size company. How have you seen Evonik adapt their recruiting and initiatives to adapt to this next generation of workers and what's important to them?
Yeah, we're also stressing, things like sustainability and corporate culture. We also provide a lot of flexibility at Evonik, and we're underscoring that in our recruiting efforts. So we have over 40 sites in the Americas. So geographic flexibility is is a big hook for us, as people often want to work in areas where they went to school or where their family is, and we can offer a career progression where people have flexibility in terms of geographic location. Also, we supply a number of dynamic industries. Although the chemical industry itself is quite mature, we're supplying some more dynamic industries like semiconductor manufacturing, sustainable applications like wind energy, e-mobility, and so forth. So we're trying to stress that, and also, stress flexibility as well with our employees, and work-life balance, and tailor, our culture to what the incoming employees are looking for.
So Jeff, you mentioned work-life balance. There's a lot of activity in the media today. Companies both in our space and outside of our space are struggling with the topic of return to work or hybrid work environments. Some companies are going back to pre-COVID times and requiring employees to be in the office 100% of the time. Other companies are doing quite the opposite and allowing employees to work from home or elsewhere 100% of the time, and then anything and everything in between. Pros and cons of both. Comments about corporate culture come up all the time, about lack of time in the office. But what is your opinion, and where do you see the hybrid work topic playing a role in recruitment, retention, and attraction of talent? And looks like Jeff may have had some technical difficulties. So Susan, I really wanted you to answer that question, not Jeff anyways. So why don't you maybe pinch hit for Jeff, and any comments on the balance of in the office versus remote work?
Jeff's back, maybe. I don't know if he's able to answer it or if you want me to pinch hit.
Okay, I think I got the question. So if you can hear me now, I'll go for it. Evonik was a front runner in flexible hybrid work early in the pandemic. We allowed people to work remotely if they could, and that was a trend at the time. And what we're seeing lately is a couple of high-profile announcements from companies like Amazon, actually demanding 5 days a week return to work. So the pendulum seems to be swinging back toward in-person. And we are responding by modifying our original policy from 3 or 4 years ago to try to get people a little bit more back in face-to-face collaboration settings. We think that our teammates, will collaborate and brainstorm and move the company forward better. Sometimes heads down task work is or me work is better done at home, and you can be more productive. But I think most of our positions require some kind of mix of me work and we work, and so we're currently trying to swing the pendulum back in the direction of more in-person work, which has a lot of caveats, and a lot of people have adjusted their lifestyles toward remote work, and maybe have to adjust back now. Some have even relocated to other states where we don't have an Evonik facility. So it's quite complex. We do believe that hybrid work is the right measure there, and we're trying to get all of our people who are not in field sales to be back in the office 2 days a week as a kind of a hybrid model.
So Susan, with Regenity and your role as managing all of human resources there, do you find yourself inundated with this topic right now? Or has your company settled into a nice balance of what remote work could look like?
I think there's a little bit of a tension or a friction between what certain positions or candidates would like, and that they can reasonably perform from home. But we are a manufacturing organization, and we just make the statement. We say we prefer in person. So we do that throughout the recruiting process. We let people know, because I don't want people to come and join us, and then there's this tension between they want more work from home and we want less work from home. So we do have a 2-day work from home policy, remote policy. We just formalized it. It was a little bit more vague. That just came out last month. And it is a topic, but I think at some point I just realized like it's part of our culture. We're very fast. And so it can be much better and easier to walk down the hall, talk to the person, solve a problem, be creative with each other, and then move on. And with that speed requirement, we just feel like there is more to it than just whether you can or cannot perform from home. We believe that it optimizes performance. So we decided to just say it. And if you can work from home, and then up to 2 days, then you can. But we also want to let people know that we really like seeing each other. Today, it's a hustling and bustling office. It's exciting to have the people around and get to work together. And we don't want to be shy about saying it while also still offering flexibility for those who need it and trying to make it a competitive work environment.
And Keith, what has your experience been at Air Liquide with this difficult topic? I'm sure there's a lot of passion as well on your end.
So I actually joined Air Liquide during COVID. So I joined remote. I did not see my team in person for 3 or 4 months, and that required approvals and a plan and masks and everything. And we've since then transitioned to, for most office workers, operations is a different story. They've always been in person. But most office workers, it's a 3-2 hybrid. Executives are a bit of an exemption from that. I'm expected to be in 5 days, although often I'll work a day at home if I have an extended global meeting schedule, today being one of those days, as my first meeting was at 6 a.m. with Korea. So the data is pretty clear that hybrid can work for knowledge workers as long as the days that they're in the office are coordinated. If you have people that work together that are going to be in person at least a couple days a week, that can work. And the analogy is, before COVID, I traveled 20, 40, sometimes 50% of the time, and I managed to still maintain good face-to-face relationships with my colleagues. If you're doing that during a hybrid work environment, that works as well. We also find even the hybrid can be less competitive than people that are offered fully remote work. We've actually lost 2 or 3 people on my team who got jobs that were fully remote, and it worked better for their family. And we thought long and hard about whether to make a modification, and we've just said no. 3-2 is what's right for us, particularly given that our operations colleagues are there 5 days plus. It just doesn't feel fair. We are trying to make the office a more pleasant place. It's easy to forget after a couple of years of COVID that you need things like celebrations and full all hands meetings, and certainly food always helps. Trying to have food as much as you can makes people enjoy being in the office. And we recently even put a ping pong table in the main canteen area where people eat, and you'd be surprised how often people just take a break and play ping pong. So it's a difficult problem. It continues to be a difficult problem. Do you monitor them, that kind of thing? But the 3-2 seems to have turned out to be the right thing for us.
Yeah, I've even seen pickleball courts hop up on campuses now to help people come back into the office. And maybe open question to the 3 panelists. It seems like all 3 of you have some sort of a hybrid option for your employees. Have you seen any negative effects on maintaining corporate identity or corporate culture? Or is that 3-2 balance that I'm hearing somewhat consistently, is that sufficient to maintain your brand identity and who your companies are to your employees? So open to the field.
Yeah, maybe I'll go first. I mean, we had a very flexible, not so well-defined categorization of hybrid workers, and we gave some people the option of saying like up to 2 days a week, and a lot of people said great, so I'm there 1 or 2 days a week. But some people said okay, up to includes 0 days a week, right? So we had many people coming in maybe 3, 4, 5 times a year, and we noticed that they lost connection. And one of the things we realized during hybrid meetings is that the people sitting in the room were maybe 50% of the people in the room and 50% up on the screen. The 50% in the room were providing 80 to 90% of the input in the meeting, and the ones on the screen were kind of a little bit detached. And you all know it's sometimes difficult to be heard when you're up there on the screen and to really get your point across when you're not in person.
Mm-hmm. Keith or
Yeah,
Susan,
and I think for our side, because we do have some in person, and there's so much because two of our facilities here in the U.S. are manufacturing, and one is a like logistics distribution center, so they're on site, and there's a lot of people coming in and out. So I don't think that we've lost it. We didn't really go full remote post the crisis, right? So once we weren't dealing with a crisis anymore, it was a come back to the office with some hybrid if the position allowed. No longer, so not the same description that Jeff had. So I think we're okay with the cultural aspect. I think some of the challenge comes with onboarding and developing. So people want to have work from home right away, and during those first months, I think it takes longer then to be able to get them to identify with the company culture, to really integrate them into the organization, and especially for early career or just like new in a job type, it's a lot harder. So I think in those areas, we struggle a bit with any of the hybrid, even a couple of days a week. But I think Jeff's point about the hybrid meetings, I really don't have a solution for that. And we prefer in person, but I find that if we're going to have a meeting where a majority of the folks are not in the room, if it's a large meeting, we just all sit in our offices so we can have an even playing field for everybody who's participating in the call. I don't know a way to solve for the hybrid. We're trying, but we haven't found the solution yet to make a good, effective hybrid meeting. So we just all do virtual. Even if we're in the same office, we're just taking it from our offices.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. So Keith, whether it's working from home or working in the office, another common complaint from our industry is the quantity of work does not seem to be going down, regardless of where we're working. And if this labor problem continues, potentially that burden on employees only continues to get greater. How do topics and initiatives like digitalization and automation and AI and that whole space, how do they help employees and companies with this labor problem we're all trying to work through? Are there types of work in your field, Keith, that could be more easily automated to help alleviate this labor burden?
So I'm not certain. I would say it alleviates the labor burden. It's probably cost and time savings, which I guess for the working engineer feels like less of a hassle, right? So where in the past you have to go out in the field and hand draw, sketch out existing conditions. Now you can bring in a scanning team from an engineering company, and in the course of a day or even an afternoon, sometimes you have a down to a 16th of an inch drawing overnight, and then you can have the engineering company attribute it and tell you exactly what you're looking at, including sometimes pictures of people with measurements attached to them. So really remarkable. What used to take me, I would have try to generate a piping and instrumentation drawing. It'd take me half a day to draw a relatively simple one, and then have to have it drafted and check it and all of that. That can be, of course, minutes, right? You can do an entire plant in a day. So that's a big time savings. The other place that technology's been brought to bear is with machine learning. So if you have equipment that has patterns that can be correlated, the correlations that you can get from machine learning are much more complicated and much easier to generate. And so you can, for instance, in my last company, we would look at turbine vibration data, look for what's normal, and then the machine would tell us when something abnormal happened, and it would give the maintenance people a jump on at least seeing a problem before it was a problem. So I'm not sure any of those really saved labor, except for maybe draftspeople, but it certainly saves time and money when you're trying to generate that information. People keep asking me about AI. When are we going to get to AI? And in the sense of large language models, frankly, other than when I go into Google, I haven't seen an application at work yet. So Microsoft Azure we use a lot, and obviously the scanning, like I talked about. But large language models, people aren't using it to help them with their writing or anything.
Good. So, Jeff, you're known as a cutting edge technologist. How is this space hit home for you at Evonik, and where you see these types of new tools being available for companies as they look to, potentially automate, replace work, save labor, etc. So people can be more efficient in their day-to-day critical job tasks.
Yeah, we have a lot of people working on the topic of digitalization, and we're constantly stressing, especially from the Americas, that the target should be increased productivity in one way or another. For individuals, but also at the plant level, as Keith was pointing out. We have also adopted an Evonik version of Chat GTP, so we're able to use that securely within the company, and I think that also makes administrative workers and in marketing, sales functions more productive. But also in R&D formulations, we've applied some of these methods, and also things in the support functions such as touchless order processing, where purchase orders can be scanned and automatically processed. It's not perfect yet. It still requires some human interaction, but the target for us is, like any other innovation throughout history, to improve worker productivity in order to benefit. And that will offset, hopefully some of the demands for more output per person. And we can continue to get more from our people.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. So we've talked a little bit today about different things that are important to employees at companies. And Susan, I'm sure you've never heard in your career that compensation and benefits is an issue at all. That's never a problem dealing with people from a labor standpoint. But pure hypothetical, Susan, if this topic was important to people, what are you seeing as those latest trends or tactics or theories or philosophies in employee compensation and benefits? And their corresponding impact on recruitment and retention. Are there unique ideas in this area, or is it just more of the same that we've been used to for decades?
I guess a lot of it might be very similar to decades, but there's some new things too. Some of it doesn't seem so new. We have modified our benefits offerings to include parental leave. What we're doing is we really listen to the employees and see what they need. We look at the market, but we're small enough, like we know our audience. And so we do address compensation. We make adjustments as we need to, and when that comes up. That's, I guess, a traditional approach. We do also look at what are some additional add-ons we might be able to provide to our employees to make a difference, making the investment within them. But a lot of our investment is within employee engagement and having them feel like their work matters. So that's like a perk to them. And I don't just mean about the products that we make, but that their ideas and what they're doing with an entrepreneurial spirit, that they come into the office every day, that they get to make a difference, and then they'll be recognized for it, whether it's engagement within the communities where we operate, or if it's engagement in continuous improvement processes, or cost reduction. They get to give their ideas, they get to work on the projects, and then they get compensated for it. So that's one way that we believe is a strong way to retain this very talented workforce, keep them engaged. That's why I call it employee engagement, maybe not the traditional one of, ice cream socials, but this is part of our engagement strategy is having them help us find the solutions, as I think we all expect to have happen. But now we've created a process to reward and recognize them directly. And now there's career paths. So I don't think that's new, but it's very important. I think increasingly important to employees, which almost surprises me because the world of work is changing so much. So I'm surprised that we're still looking for those steps when I think the jobs might be different in the future. They will be, and the skill sets that will be required will be different. But we also do listen to our employees there, where we're small enough to do this. So we listen to them. A recent example is we had an employee in the manufacturing area who has an inkling or an inclination for continuous improvement. And he made a pitch that there'd be a value if we created a position for a continuous improvement engineer. Then he applied for it and he got the role. So these are things that I think help our employees to feel that they can get more out of being in this environment just by that, the dialogue, the discussion, and then the action to follow. We also do customized retention plans. So every other week, our executive leadership team sits and talks about, who are we, looking at? What are we going to do to make sure that they feel happy and engaged and want to be part of the Regenity story for the long time to come? And then we make sure we're taking action against it, aligned with what their career aspirations are. So those are some of the things that we're doing. I'm not sure if anybody else has additional things that might be helpful for the audience.
Yeah, so maybe I can mention we do have stay interviews where we're trying to gauge what's important to our employees, and our demographics are such that we're having a lot of retirees being now replaced with early career professionals. We actually have an employee resource group that's for early career professionals. I'm the executive sponsor there. And we try to tap into what they're thinking, what their needs are, what they want in terms of compensation and benefits. And, as we continually review our benefits package, we're doing things like, well, should we enrich our long-term disability, which may be more appealing to later career people, or should we go on paternal or parental leave and fortify that a little bit? And so we tend to be trending toward elements of our benefits package that are more appealing to incoming workers, early career workers, to try to boost our recruiting efforts.
So Jeff, some of those newer ideas that you just mentioned, where are those ideas and concepts coming from? Do you see that coming from, say, the broader employee base, proposing them to folks like yourself or the HR community? Or do you see that more of the outside in, that you see a monitoring of what's happening in the market, and then the folks that are empowered are then creating policies and applying them to employees?
Yeah, we have both. So we're looking externally what peer companies are doing, and we have people constantly monitoring that, but we also tap into what our people are thinking in workshops and employee resource groups, and ask them directly, what is it that we can do better to make Evonik more attractive for you?
Thank you. So Keith, maybe compare and contrast new engineers of today versus engineers 20, 30 years ago. I know when I was in college and I received my permanent offers, I was focused solely on salary. They sent me a brochure on benefits. I didn't read it. I made my decision purely based on salary. Extremely uneducated, extremely naive. And I'm just thankful my employer has a good benefits plan right now. But has that decision-making changed for the younger engineers when they think compensation and benefits? And when you're recruiting engineers in college, what are they looking for? Or is it more like my ignorance of 30 years ago, and it's just straight salary?
So it's not even younger engineers, right? So millennials aren't younger engineers anymore, right? We're into Gen Z, right? So to me and you, sure, they're younger, but they're some of our mid-career people now. So yes, it's absolutely changed. Not completely. Salary's still important, but and this actually ties into a question that came in through the chat. Particularly individual contributors are looking for meaning, right? People that are on the management track enjoy managing, and that gives them meaning. But the individual contributors in particular want to be doing something that they can be proud of. So we have things like a technical career ladder where you can be recognized for where you are in your in your career progression. But there's also Air Liquide has a fairly unique program called the Technical Community Leader, which is not a salary grade. It's a recognition that you've shown a mastery of a subject. So it's across a broad range of domains, everything from operations to all the major engineering disciplines, and then down to an engineering discipline within a product line. So you could be a technical community leader in electronics, carrier gases, and be the person who's a go-to. And you're on a list where people can call you and get your advice. And vice versa, you can find people on that list and get advice from them. So I think that's a pretty unique thing that Air Liquide does that that I found interesting. There's a small amount of money with it, a couple $1,000s, I think, that also makes it an incentive for people to apply. But everyone puts it in their signature line, next to their pronouns. So that's enjoyable as well. But again, going back to the very first answer, how to motivate people to join is with things that are hot topics today, like green energy, semiconductors, growth industries. That continues throughout people's careers as well. At least be serving a market that has meaning for them as well.
Yeah. So maybe just to follow up to that, Keith, when you talk about that attracting and keeping folks and what's important, what do you see companies doing in terms of those continually changing employee expectations regarding workplace culture, diversity, equity, inclusion? Are employees looking for employers that provide that more community feel, employee resource group opportunities to promote these inclusive cultures? What's your opinion on that space?
Sure. So, I mean, it's an important subject to me personally. I've long been a proponent of employee resource groups. I've been a leader of a few. I've been an ally to a bunch, and I even started the concept entirely with a bunch of other people at my last company when I was in green energy. The people really want to make connections to other employees, and the employee resource group is the easiest way to do that. And there's so many now that there's hardly anybody that doesn't fit into one or the other. So it doesn't. It can feel exclusive. If you watch the news, people feel like it's excluding sometimes. So there's an element of that in society, but there's always an area, be it the obvious ones, women's groups, minority groups, but there's also parents, veterans, new career employees, like Jeff was saying, retirees, that sort of thing. So it really helps people to feel closer to each other and closer to the company. And frankly, I've found it to be a way for people to advance because they make connections in other parts of the company as well. So I always advise people, if you have any passion around any subject, either find an employee resource group that demonstrates that passion, or where you can feel that passion, or start one. They're really not hard to start. Anybody who's willing to do effort generally winds up being an officer. So it's really and valuable thing in any company.
So, Jeff, you mentioned you're the executive sponsor for one of these employee resource groups at Evonik. Maybe if you could talk a little bit about your experience as that sponsor, the effect it has on employees, and if it helps to create that culture within a company, and then ultimately have that retention effect that have been talking about throughout our time together today.
Yeah, I think it's a really good vehicle for information flow to the members of the ERGs, regardless of the ERG. When you have an executive sponsor, you really get close to these people. There's not a lot in that group. We have about 140 in the ERG that I run. So we have face-to-face meetings planned. It's a rather new ERG, so we haven't had one yet, but we have a couple planned for early next year. And we've had virtual meetings now, and I think the information exchange is two ways. So they're learning about the decisions that the company makes, what's the background behind it. For me, I'm also learning from them, what this generation of workers values, what they want to see, and it's really been a really good learning experience, two-way for us. And I think the other ERGs are similar in that regard.
Mm-hmm. So Susan, at a smaller company with just not as many people, can ERG still be created and formed at smaller companies too? And do you see the value that they provide employees with helping to drive culture?
I think honestly, it's about community, right? So I think if we're bringing people together on a topic, the ERG topic itself seems big, so making it so formal. That's one of the things about Regenity is we are a lot smaller. So some of the things that we happen are more informal. So we do have groups of employees who come together naturally, but not with this executive sponsorship and the other aspects. So we're missing some of the benefit of it. At the moment, what we're focusing on is our engagement committee, where we do have executive sponsors, and there is a connection between what employees feel is important to create a sense of community with the organization, and you get some of that executive exposure for the employee and some of that feedback loop that Jeff was just talking about. We haven't engaged with an ERG yet. I think there's value to it, and it's just a matter of one step at a time, and also seeing where there might be a gap, where the engagement committee might have a blind spot and we're not inviting and including a particular component of our organization. So I think it's yet to come. I do see a value in it.
Great, thank you. Just want to remind everybody that we're almost done with the formal portion of this panel, and we'll be switching over to Q&A in a minute. So please get those questions in, and again, take advantage of the talent that we have here on this panel today. So maybe if we take a step back and think about this conversation we've had, and where is it taking us? Do you foresee the situation that's in front of us right now staying the same, getting better, getting worse? That if you have your crystal ball, maybe you could share with the folks on the line today, where do you think the labor market is going in, say, 5, 10, 15 years? And maybe some nuggets on what they could take from your insights on things they need to be doing today to prepare for that future of work that's in front of us. And maybe Keith, would you like to start us off as the resident engineer?
Sure. So it's hard to see things other than through the situation I'm in today, right? So our division is global. It's broad and thin. So 600 or 700 people over 10 plants in 8 time zones. We're still looking for a plant somewhere around the international date line just to make it interesting. So our labor market is increasingly global, and yet still trying to exert influence locally, right? So we have not figured out a way to hire people that don't speak English. That's when you get to that point where you can start to hire people locally that don't speak English, then it opens up a whole new avenue for you. And also haven't figured out a way to meet globally with so many time zones. It's really, really difficult to have information travel that way. So we have to look for people that are very independent, and look whether the labor market matches that. It can be a challenge, right? You're looking for an English-speaking, very independent person who can understand many different cultures. However, having said that, with the internet and having your cell phone with you all the time so you can do Google Translate, it's not as hard as you'd think. The technology has kind of brought the society along on that journey for us. Because I've been a global manager since 2004, and it certainly was a lot harder to land in China with just a little card with the name of your hotel in Chinese on it than to land with a cell phone and have it tell the cab driver where you want to go. So I'm not going to try to predict the future about where things are going, but certainly can point out those challenges that we're trying to get through.
Okay, great, thank you. And Jeff, what's your crystal ball tell us?
Yeah, we're hearing that the challenges that we're facing today are only going to get more pronounced moving forward, right? So we know that we have to keep doing what we're doing and trying harder in the future. So, stressing some of the activities that we're involved in with regard to sustainable solutions and really highlighting that in those dynamic industries that we serve. Continuing to provide more flexibility when we can to our employees through hybrid work, through different locations, things like that. And a strong presence in South America, particularly in Brazil. And we've been utilizing that as a talent, a source of talent for North America as well. We have a much bigger footprint in North America than South America, but we're very good at recruiting people in Brazil. The German chemical industry is a very attractive one for people in South America, particularly in Brazil. And Brazilian people, especially younger Brazilians, really are attracted to living in the United States. It's like a dream for them. So we're very lucky to have that, because we do recruit a lot of talent there. They readily move up here when we have a need. And I would say we have now maybe a disproportionate number of South Americans coming up to North America, to the United States, to live and work with us. And it's worked out really well. And you know, the language barrier that Keith talked about, we haven't really run into that, because most of these people have a very good English skills. They speak English, Portuguese, and Spanish. And it's been a tremendous pipeline for us for talent. And I think it will only get better in the future, and more utilized in the future.
Great, thank you. And then Susan, your crystal ball, what do you see coming?
Well, I think what Jeff said is right as a headline. Like, it's not going to get any easier. And I think the topics may be similar, though they're evolving and driven by technological advances, the demographic shifts, and the changing employee expectations. So as that evolves, I think it's going to continue to change faster and faster. So we're going to have to look at what we're doing more frequently than we ever did in the past. And I think that, you know, an old topic is the retiring workforce. How do we get our new employees trained and able to take on with all that knowledge loss in the organization? How do we do a better job of transferring that knowledge? What about new jobs that we haven't even thought of yet that we need to build the skills in our organization? I think those are areas that we have to focus on and do it faster and do it better. And on the purpose-driven workplace, that's not going to change. It's going to continue to be important, and sustainability continues to be important. Flexible work models, I think, as well, for even in labs and other areas where we know, like, we need the people to be on site. So what could flexibility look like? I think those are things that we're going to be forced to try to solve for them. At the same time, I do think that we, as you know, companies who need certain skill sets might need to look at how to get those skills into students earlier. How do we encourage students to be going into a more technical track? We talk about STEM programs. AICHE used to have, I don't know if they still do, doing a World of Good campaign to try to get more diverse engineers into the workforce, and a lot of studies as to where the fallout was for females and other underrepresented minorities. And so it seems like it's going to need some other intervention to ensure that we continue to have the skills that we need in order for our businesses to thrive in the future.
Okay, thank you. Well, no surprise on a topic as important as this, we have some great questions coming in from the audience. And Jeff, I'm going to throw this first one to you. Are there partnerships between companies and educational institutions that are providing successful in building a future talent pipeline?
Yeah, there are. We have a list of target schools that we really focus our recruiting on, and our recruiting is not limited to those schools, but they're schools that are in the proximity, geographically close to major sites of ours, which we find is an important long-term retention factor. But we get in there early and during the recruiting cycle, so we're already signing up people for post May graduation for next year, 2025. You have to get in early, and you have to have a presence at those target universities. And like Keith said, we also have rotational programs and hooks like that to get people interested in Evonik, where they can start out their first 2 years in 3 different jobs, and one of those assignments is in Germany, which is really appealing to a lot of graduates. And we've had a lot of success, with a handful of target schools, but we don't limit our activities, our recruiting activities to those schools, but we kind of focus on those and give them priority. And then, we're hoping to improve our retention rates with recruiting close to our sites, so that people can, if they choose to remain, in the community or near the community that they grew up in, which isn't always really important, in your first few years of your career. But we find that, at 5 and 10 years in, when you start a family, a lot of people like to be close to have grandparents around. And so we're looking at all the factors that help with, mid and longer term retention, and trying to address those as well.
Mm-hmm. So Susan, here's one for you back on the DEI movement. The wave of the DEI movement has clearly lost some momentum and is getting some pushback there in the market. Have you seen this pushback causing any changes in your recruiting or talent retention?
It hasn't changed it in ours, though I do understand the basis for the question, and we continue to look to see how we can get the best talent and ensure that our workforce represents the talent that we have available access to, which we are in New Jersey and the Netherlands. So we have a diverse pool of candidates to pull from. So we do find that if we can find the most qualified people and they can be diverse, and that is what our workforce looks like. So for us, I think that we're managing. I think it's a lot harder when your companies are working in an area. Keith, I don't know your locations, but if you have an area where it's not diverse and that local pool of talent, how you handle this particular issue where you need to get the best qualified people in the local area, but then it has an impact on your diversity. Maybe even what you might have had as stated targets in the past, not quotas, of course, but objectives. For us, we have not changed our recruiting efforts, and I think part of it is because of where we're operating, that we can get diverse candidates at the top level of talent.
Great, thank you. So Keith, staying with that that mindset, but just looking at skill set, not necessarily from a DEI standpoint, but do you see there being harder skills in the chemical industry to either recruit for or to fill, and why? And why? You're muted, Keith. You're on mute.
So absolutely the hardest is automation and controls, because automation controls, where it used to be, it came in after pneumatic instruments, but it used to be more of a specialized chemical business sort of piece of work, has now become mixed in with every other piece of computer programming that's out there, right? The line between operations technology and information technology is thin, and the people that can do it have massive overlap. So it takes me 5-6 months to find somebody. Very often I have to make a compromise on who I would like to join, and then the turnover is massive. I recently lost my global director of automation, and finding it, and I have it posted in US and in Korea, and still haven't found a candidate. That I think I've talked to one out of 20 resumes that have come across my desk. So extraordinarily difficult, not a problem that I've solved. I'm lucky enough to be within a large company, so we're actually talking about consolidating divisional controls groups, which has its own challenges, because having controls for an air separation plant would be quite different than a desktop. Some of our plants are almost desktop size because of the hazards of our materials and the value. So for sure, the hardest. So if you're looking for job security and you're in the chemical industry, go into controls. That's definitely your way to go.
Fully agree.
Thanks, Keith. And Susan, we have one more question, difficult one for you. I'm curious your perspective on this. In today's world, many people are in two-worker home situations, two-career families, and in many cases, not many cases, I apologize, that one of those two people may have a situation where they need to relocate to a different site. How do you handle those types of situations where it's a two-career family, but only one person is in a situation where relocation is being proposed?
Yeah, I think that's a difficult one. We aren't encountering it in this current role, but in the past, of course, it's got to be an interesting career opportunity for the person. It is a family decision. And while the company can't necessarily make up the lost income on the other side, I think when we are, or in my past, when we were looking at opportunities for people to relocate, if it's really for the development of the person and their potential leadership in the organization, we do want to make it something that's worthwhile and successful for the family. But it can be very difficult, especially if there's other factors, including kids and things like that. So I think it's unique with each individual to see what is the motivation to have them move. Is it their motivation? Is it the company's motivation? How can we help them and support within the guardrails that we have set? but we certainly can't offset a second income from Evonik. I said Evonik from the company, but you can try to find ways where maybe there's a connection locally in the community where the person can find another job, as long as there's other factors that are taken care of as well. So I think it's quite complicated, but it is a dialogue, and certainly the company can't just offset the second income, which is what makes it so challenging. At least that's my opinion on that.
Yeah, no, thank you, Susan. And I think a word you just shared there, complicated, I think that's emblematic of the dialogue we just had today. Very difficult and complicated topic. To the broader audience, I hope you've enjoyed and hearing from these three talented individuals and on such an important, difficult, and complicated topic. So I want to say a profound thank you to our panelists. And Peter, any final words for us today?
Yeah, I just want to, first of all, thank what a wonderful panel. And I think, Susan, I think you meant to say that if someone needs a second job, they should always go to Evonik. Is that right? What was that your conclusion there? I think it was like a Freudian,
Sorry, Jeff.
right? It's a Freudian. They're a global thing, so they always have a place for a spouse, right? So, but on that note, I really want, first of all, I want to thank the panelists. I also want to thank Robert for organizing the panel. And the audience for the wonderful questions. But there's always a measure of how good a panel is, which is how many people logged in and how many people are left at the end. And we lost one person for the whole hour, which means you did a great job. The last thing I want to say is, so I do encourage everyone to attend the November 20th event. At 1 o'clock. It is going to be virtual, and it's this world has turned into a really wacky place with uncertainties in almost every category, right? Whether it's geopolitical, economic, industry structure, overcapacity, commodity chemicals, so forth. So we'll try not to be totally depressing on November 20th, but those of you who attend, I think there'll be some very interesting insights and that I think you're going to find worthwhile about what's going on, but also what are some of the solutions. And I just chaired a conference that my firm hosts yesterday, and we had that topic, and it was a pretty extraordinary meeting. So we look forward to seeing all of you on November 20th, and thank you again, all panelists, and thank you for all of the attendees who hung in there and got some good lessons. Remember, Evonik is a perfect place to work, right?
Well, thank you, everyone.